how would you describe the emphasis that is put in terms of public policy on treatment and prevention versus law enforcement? Because as you've described, there are four prongs to your approach to the issue, and you have the perception that the emphasis of governments is essentially on law enforcement because it's visible, it's more secure psychologically to be told that they will be in prison or they will be locked away is always pacifying. Then the honest people can sleep in their home. But in fact, what is the emphasis that has been put on that approach versus the three other one that you feel would be more effective to address the problems at its root? I'm not talking here about organized crime. Organized crime is another reality. I think we confuse two things here. We confuse the big dealers with the addicted who try to get his drugs and by doing all kinds of things, by reselling small quantity. But I think that the major problem that we want to tackle, in my opinion, needs to have as much emphasis on the three other one than on that one. And from the experience that you have had, how would you compare the importance that are given to the other one versus the one on law enforcement? Are we not, in fact, going for the easy solution that seems to be the most effective one, which is to lock them away, versus to try to treat them or approach them with the medical and psychological support that those people need if we want to be sure that they will be cured and not sent back in prisons 3 months later that they have been released?
Well, Senator, your question can be answered very simply. First of all, if you look at the finances of it, we can say, well, what a society values is what it spends money on. And the money is overwhelmingly spent on enforcement. I mean, the percentages are something like 80% to the 20% for the other three, or even higher than that, in favor of enforcement. That's why I talk about the three toothpicks and the one pillar. You couldn't sustain a building when you put all the emphasis into one pillar. It wouldn't hold the roof up. No wonder the roof is caving in on our policies. So financially, that's where the emphasis is. In terms of political discourse, I hear very little about prevention. I hear very little about child abuse, which is the basis of most addictions. I hear very little about support for families. I know in Ontario right now they're going to put this daycare bill, which is another issue, but the result of it is that kids will be more isolated from the parents in their lives and more in with their peer group all the whole day, more inclined, therefore, to accept the influence of the peer group, therefore, in the end, more inclined to use drugs. You know, unless, for example, in those daycares, real nurturing adult supervision is provided, not just supervision, but emotionally nurturing supervision. But even in that field of the Ontario daycare bill, I've seen nothing about the emotional support these kids need. It's all about we're going to provide them with good education and the parents can pick them up at 6 o'clock in the evening. So what I'm saying is that that whole emphasis on the emotional support that children need is lacking from public discourse. It's lacking I used to be a high school teacher. It's lacking in the education of physicians, of educators, of psychologists, and so on, let alone in the justice system. And so when a young criminal gets inside the justice system, they get very little support. And the best way to introduce young people to drug use, these kids will be into foster care, serially abandoned over and over again, because the behaviors are difficult. Then end up in the juvenile detention system. You might as well just give them a crack pipe or a heroin syringe. And so I don't see either the public discourse and certainly the finances going into the other three realms. I see it all pretty much flowing in the direction of an enforcement of laws that are impossible to enforce.
What about the drug court and the rehabilitation support that they could get once they are, that they are found guilty of using drugs or consuming drugs or selling drugs for their own benefit?
I think the drug court is a brave and useful attempt, a useful step in the right direction. It's not the answer, but it's certainly more humane. It's more collegial. It's less punitive. It's more of an attempt to respect the dignity of the individual, and anything in that direction I would support. And the drug court is an encouraging step in the right direction.
Would you care to comment, Professor
Thank you.
Skinner?
Yes. I think drug courts are important, and it's also important to acknowledge that the champions of drug courts really have come from the criminal justice system. They're judges, they're Crown prosecutors, they're people who work in that system who really, in Ontario, who have innovated and piloted in this area. And so I think there's intelligence and knowledge in that system that could be tapped into having more compassionate and effective responses to people with these problems. I think too often the court time is really preoccupied with human problems that deserve, direction. The element of supervision, I mentioned earlier that mandatory treatment actually for people who are about to lose their jobs is a very effective way of getting people to change behavior and sustain those behaviors. Most people don't change because they wake up in the morning and say, in my heart of hearts, I want to change. Basically, people change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, really, as those of us who do motivational interviewing talk about. So the issue is using the opportunity, if you will, that somebody had been brought before the court represents to create something that gives an individual an opportunity to make a change in their life. And drug courts start to do that, actually. And again, endorsing drug courts and making it a more systematic part of the way that criminal justice is done for people with these complicated human problems, I think is a very promising thing to pursue.
What about the rehab service when you are in prisons? How do you evaluate their availability and quality in terms of their effectiveness to produce positive results?
I've been invited to speak in a few prisons in British Columbia, and my contact with people in prisons and the correctional system is that it's not very systematic, for one thing. It's very much dependent on the particular views and personality of the warden in a particular jail. Some are more compassionate, others are more controlling, and they think that through control they can achieve their purposes. So my limited contact with the correctional system would tell me that there's no overall systematic approach that embraces the biopsychosocial perspective. Not surprising, because even the medical profession is slow to come to it. So that there are some encouraging examples here and there, but overall we're sorely lacking, and mostly it's an attempt to control and coerce rather than to promote the recovery and development of the individual.
So in other words, we have not really introduced that approach in the system, per se.
No, we haven't. And furthermore, of course, with the cutbacks, programs are being cut within the jails and outside the jails. In British Columbia right now, the provincial government cut the only program for addicted youth in northern British Columbia. Predictably, those kids will end up in jail, in the new jails that we're building. This is where we're going.
What about
and we're doing it with open eyes.
On the other, those are valid concerns. On the other side, there are beachheads. Correctional Services Canada has an addiction research center in Prince Edward Island. They've developed some very good programs. I can think of programs for women with very complicated mental health and addiction issues. But again, these are pilot initiatives. They're not, the system isn't organized around this, but there are places to start from if we want to look to that and actually say where the investment should be. But basically the logic that governs the system isn't right now a correctional logic, as Dr. Maté has been arguing. And and if we wanted to turn that way, there are definitely things we could start tapping into that are there already.
So in your opinion, that would be much more effective than just to build more prisons or just add new cells for the purpose of keeping people longer in prisons?
Oh, absolutely. This is very much about how we do the work, of dealing with people who have been brought before the law. And there are ways of doing it, I think, that are going to be much more effective. They happen to be ways, ironically, that are actually compassionate. And I think that's one of the problems that, again, we're back to a large level of public arousal that is antipathetic to people who have these problems. And so there's a pressure, I think, to come down heavy on them when the evidence is that, yes, you can do that and you can make them worse in the process. But you can have processes that actually help people with these problems to better outcomes and society to better outcomes. It's not just people individually, but this is really a public health issue we're talking about, not just individual behavior change.